In the quiet town of Ash Grove, Virginia, life moved slowly. Everyone knew everyone. People left their doors unlocked, kids played in the streets until sundown, and the idea of something terrible happening felt like a distant thought. But in the summer of 2014, everything changed. Angela Martin was 29 years old. A school counselor by profession, she was beloved in the community. She ran food drives, helped local teens find college paths, and volunteered at the shelter on weekends. She was the kind of person people described as light in human form. But behind her kind demeanor, Angela was quietly battling personal demons. She had recently ended a tumultuous relationship with her high school sweetheart, Bradley Kerrigan, a local mechanic with a short temper and a record of minor arrests. The relationship had been off and on for years, marked by public fights and private reconciliations. Friends were relieved when she finally called it off for good. On the night of June 14, 2014, Angela attended a friend's bridal shower. She was seen laughing, chatting, and, by all accounts, seemed like her usual self. At 9:47 p.m., she left the venue in her silver Honda Civic. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The next morning, Angela didn't show up to help her friends set up for the wedding rehearsal. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. By the afternoon, her family reported her missing. That evening, police discovered her car abandoned on a rural road just outside of town near Galloway Woods. The doors were locked and the keys were missing. Her purse was inside, along with her phone, but there was no sign of Angela. A massive search was launched. Volunteers combed through the woods. Drones flew overhead. Cadaver dogs sniffed through fields. But there was nothing. No blood, no clothing, no indication of where she'd gone. But there was one thing: CCTV footage of her car on the highway, and behind her, just minutes later, a familiar vehicle, Bradley Kerrigan's truck. When questioned, Bradley claimed he had been at home all night watching TV. He said he hadn't spoken to Angela in weeks. But a neighbor later told police they'd seen Bradley's truck parked outside Angela's house just 2 nights before she disappeared. Police began digging into their relationship and discovered that a year prior, Angela had filed a restraining order against Bradley after a violent argument. She later dropped it, saying it was a misunderstanding. But friends said she was terrified of him. Investigators got a search warrant for Bradley's home. Inside, they found several unsettling things. A box containing old photos of Angela, some letters she had written during their high school years, and, most troubling, Angela's scarf, the one she was wearing the night she vanished. DNA swabs from her car also revealed Bradley's fingerprints on the steering wheel. Despite the circumstantial evidence, there wasn't enough to charge him. He was arrested briefly for obstruction when he gave misleading statements, but was later released. Public suspicion zeroed in on him, but something didn't feel right to the lead detective, Lena Moss. She believed there was more to this case than a jealous ex-boyfriend. 2 weeks after Angela's disappearance, a co-worker came forward. Dana Hill, who worked with Angela at the school, said Angela had been acting strangely in the days before she vanished. She was distracted, anxious, and had even withdrawn $5,000 in cash from her bank account. She told Dana she was dealing with something from the past, but didn't elaborate. Bank footage showed Angela at the ATM, visibly nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder. It wasn't long before police received a tip from someone unexpected, Jasmine Delgado, a 19-year-old former student Angela had mentored years ago. Jasmine told detectives that Angela had confided in her shortly before she disappeared. According to Jasmine, someone had been blackmailing Angela about a secret from her college years. That led police down a new path. They subpoenaed Angela's sealed college records and found something shocking. In 2004, Angela had been questioned, though never charged, in connection with the overdose death of another student, Laura Benedict. The case had been ruled accidental, but there were whispers Angela had been present during the fatal night. Now, 10 years later, someone was threatening to expose that connection. Angela had recently reconnected with Colin Reed, a former college friend who had also been part of the group involved in Laura's death. Emails between them showed growing tension. Colin demanded money. Angela refused. Detectives secured a warrant for Colin's home in a neighboring town. What they found was chilling. Buried in a flower bed in the backyard was a necklace Angela was known to wear every day. Inside his garage was a burner phone with text exchanges demanding more money and threatening to tell everyone what you did. After several hours of interrogation, Colin broke. He confessed that he had met Angela in Galloway Woods the night she vanished. They argued. She told him she wasn't going to pay him anymore and threatened to go to the police. According to Colin, he panicked. He shoved her, and she fell, hitting her head on a rock. He claimed he didn't mean to kill her. Angela's body was discovered 3 days later, buried in a shallow grave not far from where her car had been found. Forensic reports confirmed she died from blunt force trauma. Colin Reed was charged with second-degree murder, extortion, and concealment of a body. He is currently serving a 35-year sentence without the possibility of parole. The town of Ash Grove was left stunned. While many had believed Bradley Kerrigan was responsible, the truth was far more complex. Angela had been trying to start over, to do good, to atone for mistakes in her past. But someone she trusted used that past against her. Angela Martin's life was one of service, love, and quiet strength. Her story is a reminder that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, can still find their way to the surface, and that sometimes the people we least expect are capable of the worst kinds of betrayal. On the morning of October 3rd, 2017, in the picturesque mountain town of Red Pine, Colorado, 42-year-old Elise Packard didn't show up for work at the small family law firm where she had been employed for over a decade. Elise was never late. She was meticulous, predictable, and deeply respected. By 10 a.m., her assistant called her cell phone. No answer. By noon, her sister, Claire, was driving over to Elise's cottage at the edge of the forest. What she found triggered a police investigation that would unravel a case unlike anything the quiet town had ever seen. The front door was slightly open. Elise's car was in the driveway. Her dog, Jasper, was barking frantically inside. But Elise was gone. There was no sign of forced entry. No blood. No struggle. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, next to an uneaten piece of toast and a steaming cup of coffee that had gone cold. It was like she had simply vanished. Within hours, the Red Pine Police Department issued a missing person alert. Search teams combed the nearby woods. Helicopters scanned the hills. Locals organized search parties. Elise's photo, a warm smile, green eyes, shoulder-length brown hair, was plastered all over the town. The first 48 hours yielded nothing. But then something strange emerged. A neighbor, Geraldine Phelps, told detectives she had seen a man outside Elise's house the night before she went missing. He was standing by the back gate at around 11 p.m., smoking a cigarette, staring at the house. She didn't recognize him. Investigators pulled security camera footage from nearby homes. One camera, mounted on a garage 3 houses down, caught a blurry image of a tall figure in a hoodie walking toward Elise's property just before midnight. The footage was grainy, but something stood out. The figure walked with a distinct limp. Digging into Elise's recent life, police discovered she had been representing a woman named Tessa Loring in a high-conflict divorce case. Elise had taken on the case pro bono after learning Tessa was being emotionally abused and financially drained by her husband, Victor Loring, a wealthy real estate developer with a reputation for ruthlessness. Victor was furious about Elise's involvement. In court, he accused her of manipulating Tessa and threatened to ruin her. Elise had documented the threats in her private journal, which her sister later handed over to police. Detectives brought Victor in for questioning. He denied any involvement and claimed he hadn't seen or spoken to Elise in weeks. But when pressed about his whereabouts on the night of October 2nd, his answers became vague. He said he had been at his downtown apartment alone. No one could confirm it. Then, on day 5 of the investigation, a break came in the form of a hidden camera. Elise, it turned out, had installed a small, motion-activated security camera in her front garden, cleverly disguised in a birdhouse. The footage was corrupted, but a tech expert from Denver managed to recover several seconds of usable video. At 12:14 a.m. on the night she vanished, the camera captured the sound of a scuffle, followed by a soft, strangled scream. A man's voice, low, angry, unintelligible, can be heard before the feed cuts out. Investigators enhanced the audio. A single, chilling word could be made out: liar. While Victor Loring remained the main suspect, police couldn't find enough evidence to charge him. Frustrated but undeterred, Detective Miriam Sutter kept digging. She began re-interviewing Elise's clients, friends, and even old law school classmates. What she found led the case in an unexpected direction. 10 years prior, Elise had briefly represented a man named Cameron Wells, a quiet loner accused of stalking a female coworker. Elise had withdrawn from the case before trial. No one knew why. It wasn't in any of her professional records. But what raised eyebrows was that Cameron had recently moved back to Red Pine and was living less than a mile from Elise. Detectives visited Cameron's house. He was calm, polite, even helpful, almost too helpful. He said he hadn't spoken to Elise since 2007 and had no reason to contact her again. But when they ran a background check, they found something deeply disturbing. Cameron had legally changed his name in 2011 after serving time for aggravated assault and had spent the last 2 years in therapy for anger management. A search warrant for Cameron's property revealed a secret basement room. Inside were hundreds of printed photographs, all of Elise. Some taken from public events, others from her walks in the woods, and some through her windows at home. He had been watching her for years. Cameron was arrested immediately, but what came next was even more horrifying. During the interrogation, he confessed, not to murder, but to saving her. He claimed Elise had been in danger and that he had rescued her from a life of lies. When pressed for her whereabouts, he grew agitated, cryptic, and kept repeating the same phrase: "She's in the sanctuary. I made it beautiful for her." After hours of psychological evaluation and manipulation, Cameron finally broke. He led detectives deep into the forest behind his property to a concealed underground bunker, disguised beneath brush and fallen logs. There, 12 feet underground, they found a steel door bolted shut. Inside, they discovered Elise alive. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and disoriented, but she was alive. She had been missing for 9 days. The bunker was soundproof, lined with foam insulation, stocked with canned food, bottled water, a cot, books, and surveillance monitors. Cameron had created a twisted shrine to Elise, a space where he claimed they could be free from the world's judgment. He had planned the kidnapping for years, believing that Elise had saved him once and that now it was his turn to return the favor. Cameron Wells was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, stalking, and multiple federal charges related to illegal surveillance. He was sentenced to life in a maximum security psychiatric facility. Elise Packard's recovery took months. She moved out of Red Pine, changed her name, and now lives quietly in another state. She's never spoken publicly about the ordeal. Her sister Claire later published a memoir titled 9 Days Below, chronicling the horror, the investigation, and the emotional trauma that followed. The town of Red Pine still speaks of the case in hushed tones. The house Elise once lived in was eventually torn down. The woods behind Cameron's home are now fenced off, a grim reminder of what can hide in plain sight. The case became a nationwide media frenzy, but for those who lived through it, it wasn't just another headline. It was a nightmare made real. A story of obsession, misdirection, and the terrifying truth that the people who scare us most are often the ones we forgot long ago. On a chilly November evening in 1996, in the remote town of Kearney, Nebraska, 17-year-old Grace Mallory vanished without a trace after leaving her part-time shift at a gas station on Highway 30. She was last seen on surveillance footage at 10:06 p.m., walking out of the store in her blue windbreaker, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones in, nodding to music only she could hear. She never made it home. The gas station, Lou's Quick Mart, was just a mile from her house. She had walked that path dozens of times. That night, the wind was sharp, the sidewalks empty, and the streetlights flickered as they sometimes did in Kearney. When Grace didn't show up at home by midnight, her mother, Lynn Mallory, called the police. Within 12 hours, flyers went up, news stations aired her photo, and neighbors joined in the search. But Grace Mallory had simply disappeared. For weeks, police scoured the area. The river was dragged. Abandoned farmhouses were searched. Dogs were brought in. There were no witnesses. No signs of struggle. Her backpack was never found. Her body never recovered. The only clue was the last few seconds of the gas station footage. A car's headlight seen pulling into the parking lot just as Grace exited frame. The angle was wrong. The make and plate of the car were never identified. The case went cold. But Grace didn't fade from memory. Every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, her mother held a candlelight vigil outside the gas station. In 2002, a bench was installed in Grace's memory near the riverbank, where she used to sit and sketch. Her disappearance haunted the town like a ghost they couldn't exorcise. Then, in 2019, 23 years after Grace vanished, something bizarre happened. During renovations at the now-abandoned Lou's Quick Mart, construction workers broke open a false wall in the basement. Behind it, they found a box. Inside were 6 audio cassette tapes, carefully labeled with dates between 1994 and 1996. The discovery immediately drew police attention. The tapes were turned over to the Kearney Police Department. When detectives listened to the recordings, they were stunned. The tapes contained audio diary entries from Grace Mallory. Her voice was unmistakable. She spoke in a soft, introspective tone, describing her days, her classes, her fears, her dreams of moving to Chicago to study art. But what began as innocent journaling slowly turned dark. Grace started describing a man she believed was following her. She called him the Quiet Man. She said he never spoke but appeared in the background of places she frequented: the library, the park, her bus stop. She believed he was watching her. Tape 5 contained the most chilling message of all. Dated October 29, 1996, just 1 week before her disappearance, Grace said, "If anything happens to me, it's him. I know it. He's real. I think he's been inside the store at night. I think he knows where I live." But no one had reported anything strange. The store manager at the time, a man named Douglas Earle, claimed he never saw anything suspicious. In fact, when Grace disappeared, Douglas had been interviewed and cleared. He had a solid alibi and no criminal record. But something about his name struck a nerve with Detective Sophia Harlow, the new lead on the now-reopened cold case. She decided to dig deeper. Earle had left Kearney in 2000. A year later, he legally changed his name and moved to Idaho. He had never been married, had no children, and had worked low-profile jobs ever since. Detective Harlow tracked him to a trailer in Boise, where he was living under the name Dan Kessler. When authorities confronted him about the tapes, he seemed unsurprised. Calm, even. He denied involvement in Grace's disappearance, but admitted that he remembered her well. Then, almost without prompting, he said a single sentence that shook the room. "She always looked like she knew more than she should have." That gave police enough probable cause to search the property. In the crawl space beneath the trailer, they found a trunk. Inside were items spanning decades: women's clothing, Polaroid photos, driver's licenses. Some victims were known missing persons. Others were never identified. Among the items was a sketchbook. On the back cover was written, in neat cursive, "Grace Mallory, 1996. Inside were dozens of drawings, portraits, abstract nightmares, and one specific picture that would later appear on national news. A detailed sketch of a man's face, half in shadow, with the words "The Quiet Man" scrawled underneath. DNA testing on the sketchbook and clothing match samples taken from Grace's bedroom back in 1996. Douglas Earle, now Dan Kessler, was arrested and charged not only with Grace Mallory's abduction and murder, but was soon connected to 2 other cold cases from Kansas and Utah, involving teenage girls who disappeared under similar circumstances in the late 90s. In interviews, he refused to confess. He denied everything, but the physical evidence was overwhelming. Still, there was a final, shocking twist. While cataloging evidence, one investigator noticed a postmark on the edge of one of Grace's drawings inside the trunk. A date, November 17, 1997, more than a year after she disappeared. It had been stamped by a small post office in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. No record existed of Grace being seen there, and no DNA matched hers at the location. But someone, possibly Grace herself, had mailed the drawing to an art exhibit that year. It was never displayed. It was returned to sender and ended up, somehow, back in Earl's possession. This sparked a haunting question: had Grace been alive for at least a year after she vanished? Investigators couldn't answer that. Without a body, her final fate remains unknown. Earl maintained his silence until the day of his death in 2023, when he died of a stroke while awaiting trial. In a final letter to the court, he wrote only 6 words. She wasn't the first or last. In the aftermath, Grace Mallory's case remains technically open. Without a body, some still hold on a hope. Her mother, now 68, still lights a candle for her every October 3rd. The bench by the river is still visited. Flowers are still placed. The tapes are now archived in the Nebraska State Historical Society. Her voice, once hidden behind a false wall, now speaks louder than ever. A quiet girl with a loud truth no one listened to, until it was too late. On the outskirts of Garland County, Arkansas, surrounded by dense pine forests and long-forgotten back roads, sits the ghost town of Ashfield Ridge. If you drive 20 miles north of Hot Springs and ignore the rusted, no trespassing signs, you'll come across a stretch of land so overgrown, you'd think nothing ever lived there. But in the fall of 2005, Ashfield Ridge made national headlines for something so horrifying, so bizarre, that even today, locals refuse to talk about it. It began with a single 911 call. At 2:43 a.m. on October 17th, Garland County Dispatch received a call from a man named Robert Kane, a retired math teacher and former veteran who lived just outside Ashfield Ridge. He sounded confused, paranoid, almost incoherent. But one phrase came through clearly. "There's blood. They're all gone. The children, they're gone." The call dropped. When officers arrived at the Kane property, they found Robert sitting on the porch, rocking slowly, covered in dried blood. Inside the house were signs of a struggle: overturned furniture, broken glass, strange symbols drawn on the walls, and what would later be confirmed as human blood. But no bodies, no children, no one. Kane was arrested and taken in for questioning. He kept repeating the same sentence. It was the fold. They're under the house now. At first, police assumed it was a mental health breakdown, but then they checked the basement. What they found would start a 2-year investigation that would expose one of the most disturbing secret societies in recent American history. The basement door was locked from the outside with an iron bar and padlock. Once forced open, officers descended into darkness. The air was thick, foul. The basement had been retrofitted into a bunker. Metal walls, no windows, a single red bulb swinging from the ceiling. There were cages, 7 of them, all empty. But that wasn't the worst part. Etched into the walls, carved with what looked like nails or knives, were dozens of symbols, Latin phrases, and something else: names. Names of children, at least 30 of them. First names only, some repeated. One name, Revel, was carved over 200 times in different sizes and styles. Police sealed off the property and brought in state investigators. The FBI was notified. Robert Kane was placed on suicide watch. While examining the Kane residence, a trooper discovered a hidden compartment behind the kitchen pantry. Inside was a wooden lockbox containing over 100 VHS tapes, each labeled only with dates spanning from 1997 to 2005. What was on them would never be released to the public, but what leaked through interviews with former agents and an eventual whistleblower in 2011 painted a deeply disturbing picture. The tapes showed meetings, rituals, indoctrination sessions. Children, some as young as 5, being spoken to by robed adults, their faces hidden by wooden masks carved with jagged teeth and long horns. The audio was poor, but certain phrases were repeated often. The fold protects. Children of the ash must ascend. Revel is the gate. The question became, who were these children, and where were they now? Detectives traced records and found that none of the children seen in the tapes were ever registered in local schools. No birth certificates, no medical records. It was as if they didn't exist. But then, an analyst connected a pattern. Between 1996 and 2004, a total of 18 children were reported missing within a 100-mile radius of Ashfield Ridge. None were ever found. Many of the parents were transients, single mothers, or living off-grid. The cases had never been connected until now. That's when the case blew wide open. A former social worker named Leah Norrell, who had worked briefly in the region from 1999 to 2001, came forward with a chilling story. She said she'd once visited a property near Ashfield Ridge after receiving an anonymous complaint about a group home for unregistered children. When she arrived, she was met by a woman named Mother Elva, who claimed the children were being homeschooled by a religious collective. Leah was shown healthy, clean children, and nothing seemed off, but she said she was never allowed past the first floor of the building. 2 weeks after filing her report, her supervisor dismissed the case and told her to let it go. When she pushed, she was fired. She said she had lived in fear ever since. Now, her account gave investigators a new lead, a name, Mother Elva, and a property on the east side of Ashfield Ridge that hadn't been searched. What they found that would send shockwaves through law enforcement. The house had been burned to the ground in 2006, labeled an accidental electrical fire, but investigators combed the ruins and discovered a concrete trapdoor in the basement, sealed with industrial bolts. When opened, they found a massive underground complex. Rooms lined with bunk beds, chalkboards covered in esoteric symbols, surveillance monitors, locked cabinets filled with robes, ceremonial knives, and shelves of medical supplies, many expired, some still usable. In one room, they found a wall covered entirely in Polaroid photos. Children in robes. Children blindfolded. Some smiling, some not. Dozens and dozens of them. Most were never identified. But one girl, about 8 years old, with red hair and a noticeable scar on her cheek, was recognized by her mother in Kansas City, who had reported her missing in 2001. DNA testing confirmed the match, but she was never found. The case reached national attention. Media dubbed it the Children of Ashfield Ridge. Conspiracy theories exploded online. Was this a satanic cult? A human trafficking ring? A rogue religious sect gone underground? The truth was more complicated. As the FBI and state authorities built their case, they learned that the group, known internally as the Fold, had been active since at least 1988. It operated as a secretive doomsday preparation society, but with a heavy emphasis on child indoctrination. They believed children were pure vessels, capable of contacting divine entities, specifically one they called Revel, a being they believed lived beneath the earth and communicated through dreams. The leader, a woman named Elva Breyer, aka Mother Elva, had no prior criminal record. She had once worked as a nurse in Louisiana before vanishing in the early 90s. She was never captured. Her whereabouts remain unknown. Robert Kane died by suicide in 2006 while in custody, leaving behind a 17-page handwritten confession that was so incoherent it was considered a manifesto. In it, he described visions of Revel, of fire under the ground, of being blessed to teach the children the right of return. He claimed the children were not dead, only changed. To this day, no human remains were ever found at any of the properties. No bodies, no burials, nothing. Just the tapes, the symbols, the photos, and the names on the walls. In 2023, a new family purchased land outside of Ashfield Ridge to build a hunting lodge. While clearing the forest, their 14-year-old son found something in a tree hollow, a small wooden mask. Inside it was a note, folded dozens of times. It read, "We are under. We remember. Revel wakes." It was turned over to authorities. The land has since been condemned. All access roads are blocked by state order. Ashfield Ridge is officially marked as uninhabitable due to environmental hazards. But the locals know the real reason. They just don't talk about it. Because the Fold was never truly dismantled. Arrests were made, yes, but only a handful of former members. Most vanished. Some say they went deeper underground. Others believe they scattered, waiting for the right time to regroup. The children of Ashfield Ridge, if any survived, have never come forward. Whether out of fear, trauma, or loyalty, no one knows. And in the end, the question that haunts every investigator who touched the case is the one that remains unanswered. What really happened to the children?